3 days after I moved into my new house, a woman in a pink blazer nearly broke my front door down screaming that I wasn't allowed to live there. 10 minutes later, 3 police cruisers lit up my driveway, and that was when I learned my house wasn't even in her HOA. I didn't know it yet, but I was standing 52 feet outside her entire imaginary kingdom. It started peaceful enough. Coffee brewing boxes, mostly unpacked sunlight pouring through this 200-year-old oak tree in the backyard. I remember thinking, this is home. Then came the pounding. "Open up!" "You can't live here without HOA approval," she shouted, face pressed against the glass. When I opened the door, she shoved her way inside like she owned the place, clutching a clipboard like a weapon. "You have 5 minutes to explain why you're trespassing," she barked. I blinked, still holding my coffee mug. "I'm sorry." "Who are you?" Her face went red enough to set off fire alarms. "I'm Karen Thompson, president of Maplewood HOA. Every house on Oak Ridge Drive goes through me." I tried to keep calm. "Mrs. Thompson, my realtor, confirmed this address isn't part of any HOA. I even pulled up the county maps I'd saved showing the boundary ending 52 feet before my property line." She didn't even look. Fake, forged, Photoshop. She slammed her palm into my wall hard enough to leave a dent. Then, with full conviction, she called 911 right in front of me screaming, "There's a man illegally occupying a home in my HOA. He's threatening me." I hadn't even raised my voice. I remember watching her pacing in my living room, waiting for sirens like she'd just launched a missile. When the cops finally arrived, she was already sobbing to the first officer, spinning her story about being terrified for her safety. I handed Officer Wilson my deed, my title insurance, everything. He called dispatch, confirmed the address. "Not in any HOA," the dispatcher said. "Clear as day." Wilson turned back to her. "Ma'am, this property isn't within your jurisdiction." Silence. For a second, she looked like someone had unplugged her entire operating system. Then came the trembling whisper, "That's impossible. I've been here 45 years." The cops left, but she didn't. She just stood on my lawn muttering, "The maps are wrong. 45 years can't be wrong." That's when my neighbor Robert walked over. "You handled that better than the others," he said quietly. "You're number 18. My stomach dropped. 18. "She's driven off 17 families before you," he told me. "You're the first with proof." I looked back at Karen still frozen on my lawn and realized this wasn't over. She wasn't angry anymore. She was recalculating. The next morning, my inbox exploded. 47 emails from thompsonhoe.president@gmail.com. Mail to thompsonhoe.president@gmail.com. Subject lines went from official violation notice to final warning to legal action imminent. Each one came with photos of my garbage cans, my car's angle in the driveway, even my newspaper on the porch labeled as visual pollution. She was watching me literally. That's when the paranoia set in. I couldn't sleep. Every motion alert made me flinch. I started to wonder if I'd made a mistake buying this house. Maybe I should just sell and get out like the others. Then the phone rang. Officer Carter from the department. "Mr. Brooks," he said, "we've had 3 neighbors report Mrs. Thompson watching your house overnight. We can file harassment if you'd like." Relief and dread tangled inside me. So I installed more cameras, kept every email, every photo. And sure enough, a few days later at 4:13 a.m., my phone buzzed, motion detected. Karen was outside standing at the property line with a tape measure pacing, muttering to herself. 52 feet, 52. Someone moved the creek. She measured again and again as if sheer repetition could make reality bend to her will. A few days later, 6 people showed up at my door. They introduced themselves as her board members, but they all looked nervous. The leader, a woman maybe 40, said, "Mr. Brooks, I'm Jennifer Karen's niece. We're not real board members. She appointed us years ago. We just went along to keep her calm." They brought a folder thick with documents, records of every family she'd driven out. Fines, police calls, threats. 17 families, 1 woman's obsession. Then, as if summoned by our conversation, Karen pulled up in her car, same blazer eyes wild, clutching a poster board. "I have proof," she shouted, marching into my driveway with 2 surveyors trailing behind her. The creek was the boundary, they stole it. The surveyors tried explaining that property lines are determined by legal plats, not streams. "Your HOA ends at 4730, one of them said. "This house is 4782, that's 52 feet outside." Karen froze, then erupted. 52 weeks in a year. 52 cards in a deck. "You think this is a coincidence?" Her voice cracked and something in her snapped. She started crying. "If the creek is gone, then I've been wrong." For the first time, I didn't see a tyrant. I saw someone whose entire identity was collapsing. Still, I couldn't let sympathy replace self-defense. I called David Patterson, a local attorney who'd apparently been tracking her for 2 decades. "You're the first one who stayed," he said. 17 others left. We can build a case harassment, false reporting, maybe even RICO if she profited from those forced sales. But before we could file, she filed against me. A lawsuit claiming emotional distress, property fraud, even theft of historical documents. Patterson laughed. "She's digging her own grave." Then she went on live TV. I remember watching her under the news lights, that pink blazer practically glowing. "He destroyed 45 years of community standards," she shouted at the reporter. When pressed for evidence, she held up her poster board covered in red string like a conspiracy wall. "They stole the creek. The city is hiding the truth." It went viral for all the wrong reasons. Even the anchors looked stunned. The cops finally arranged for a psychological evaluation. But before they could serve the papers, I caught her on my cameras again, this time in her pajamas, talking to thin air. "I'm trying, Daddy," she sobbed. "But they moved the creek. How can I protect it if it's gone?" She wasn't performing anymore. She was unraveling. Her niece came out of the shadows, knelt beside her, whispering, "Aunt Karen, let's go home." Karen looked up, dazed. If the creek's gone, then the kingdom's gone. And just like that, she broke. The next morning, I got a hand-delivered letter from Jennifer. "Mr. Brooks, thank you for not calling the police. Aunt Karen is getting treatment now. The doctors say it's late-onset delusional disorder. She's finally resting." Inside the envelope was a crayon drawing 2 stick figures labeled Daddy and Me, a blue squiggle marked Creek, and at the bottom, "I promise to protect Daddy's kingdom forever. Karen Thompson, age 8. 6 weeks later, the courthouse was packed. 17 families filled the rows behind me. When Karen entered, I barely recognized her gray dress, trembling hands, no blazer. The judge asked if she understood the charges. "Yes, Your Honor," she said quietly. "I terrorized people for 45 years, protecting lines that only existed in my head." One by one, the families testified: the veteran who woke to inspections at dawn, the mother whose daughter was terrified of anyone in pink. The evidence piled up like bricks around a crumbling wall. When it was my turn, I stood and said, "She didn't just harass us. She built her identity on control. But people can change if we give them a chance." The courtroom fell silent. The judge delivered her verdict: 5 years supervised probation, mandatory psychiatric treatment, 1,000 hours of community service, and a permanent ban from any HOA position. But she added something unexpected: a new law. From this day forward, the judge said, the Thompson Act will require every HOA to record its boundaries publicly. No more gray zones, no more imaginary authority. Karen cried silently as her niece held her hand. On her way out, she stopped beside me and handed over that same crayon drawing. "Keep this," she whispered. "So you remember the little girl who just wanted to protect her father's legacy." And then she was gone, escorted by her family, leaving behind decades of fear and control that finally mercifully ended 52 feet short of my property line. For a long time, I just stood there staring at that drawing, thinking about boundaries, about how easily protection turns into obsession. Maybe we all have our own invisible lines we guard too fiercely. Some just forget where they end. Lesson: real authority isn't about drawing boundaries. It's about knowing when to stop enforcing them.